Hey, what's going on everybody? In this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can make a lo-fi piano sample sound using nothing but MIDI, and you can use third-party plugins or Ableton Live stock plugins, or really any stock plugins that come with the DAW that you use. So let's get right into it. I've got here Native Instruments Complete. They have Alicia's Keys, which is a really nice virtual piano. I'm running that through Ableton Live's hybrid reverb just to give it a little bit of a reverb effect. And I'm going to use one of the MIDI clips from my MIDI sample pack, which is for free. You can check it out on my Gumroad store. A link is in the description. So let's just drag and drop this in and get started. So here's the clip. So that's the MIDI clip. Pretty much like a high fidelity sounding piano. Has a really nice sound to it. I have a lot of different Ableton effects racks that I use. Part of the lo-fi starter kit that I have on my Gumroad store has this sort of like, I'll show you what I mean here. It has all these different sort of lo-fi style effect racks that use just stuff in Ableton Live. So I can drag and drop one of those in. Here's one called Lo-Fi Piano Echo. And this kind of gives us an explanation of how we make that lo-fi sound. So we're basically turning this into this. And these effect racks are really cool. They're totally for free. You can check them out for yourself. But in this video, we can go over the basic ideas that go along with making lo-fi sound design. So the first thing is the EQ. You can see how I'm basically taking this EQ bandpass and I'm just carving out basically just the mid-range. And when you have a higher piano part, it's better to not carve out totally those high frequencies, or else you might actually take out certain notes. But basically, it's just like trying to get something as cone-shaped down to those mid-range frequencies, sort of simulating the sound that you would get from like a lo-fi transistor radio, where the lows and the highs are basically non-existent. And then I'm using utility to like bring the gain back in, because when you take the frequencies out, it sort of loses a lot of volume. Vinyl distortion comes in. This gives us the crackle. So feel free to pause this video and check out these settings for yourself. But another big thing is the EQ. So I put in an EQ after vinyl distortion to actually take the highs out of the crackle, which is something that people typically overlook. And a lot of times they don't like their crackle because it sounds sort of fake. That's because the crackle is sort of high fidelity too. So with DSP, digital plugins, you gotta take that extra step to make it more realistic. The cabinet Ableton plugin I'm using here, that's just something I dial in to make it mono, which is another lo-fi feature. So I'm making it mono. It's collapsed down to mono, and I'm using the dry wet to basically add a little darkness to the sound. So just making it more dark. The cabinet plugin is really useful for that, because the amp plugin on Ableton will make something really bright and crunchy, like a guitar amplifier. So the cab is there to sort of taper that off. So this is a great darkening module. And then I have a filter delay. I usually add some kind of extra reverb or delay. On this particular audio effect rack, everything's happening on one chain. But other effect racks in the starter kit on my Gumroad site basically have like multiple parallel chains. So some of them can be quite involved and give you a lot of different sound design options. The chorus ensemble comes in. This creates the warble. So the warble is like the sound of like if you ever left a cassette deck out in a car on a hot summer day and it just melted the tape, or a vinyl record that's been just worn down and warped from time. It's going to have an unsteadiness. And I just like using the classic. I dial it in, just throw it in there with the dry wet, and it creates that really nice warm sound. You can also turn the warmth up. The warmth here is really great for adding some just nice friendly gain in the low mids. You can obviously overdo it, but this I always add this in too. So this is a great thing to dial in if you want it. The drum bus is then the saturation. Saturation is, you can go kind of overboard with saturation. You don't need to make the sound distorted, but you do want it to have a little bit of a crunch, especially on the notes that hit a little harder. And drum bus is really great for that. And you have a dry wet knob essentially right here. So I can just like dial in the dry wet once I find that desired level of like crunchiness. And then the last thing that a lot of people overlook is, you know, lo-fi has the EQ, what you're looking at on the screen, is a big part of the sound, right? You're taking away frequencies, but you're also taking away dynamic range, because a lo-fi sample that goes through like kind of a crappy sampler, or is coming from a vinyl record, or is just going through some kind of compromised piece of analog gear, it's not going to have the dynamic range either. So it's going to be missing frequencies completely, and it's going to be missing dynamic range as well. And a lot of the lo-fi sound design stuff is missing that aspect. Like it doesn't have that aspect of things being kind of small dynamically, which is what happens with lo-fi sound sources. They don't have dynamic range because it's low fidelity. So the glue compressor is perfect for that. And it also takes all the processing that came before it and sort of glues it together, which is kind of a secret to sound design. If you can take your saturation and your compression and put that at the end of your chain, it's going to start to glue together all those elements, all those layers of processing that you've done before. So I've just got this on like the basic settings, attack 1, release 0.6, ratio 4, all the default settings. I just dialed back to threshold and put in some makeup gain. And immediately that's going to add bloom. It's going to tie things together. It's going to create that squashiness that we like to hear. And then I just use the dry wet here to dial it back a little bit, so you still get a little bit of dynamic punch in the notes. It's all about balance. So that's one way you can do it. I'm just going to like delete this effect chain. You can get this for free, by the way, if you want to check out these on your own. And then I've got a great effect chain that I use that uses third-party plugins. And I know that third-party plugins are like kind of weird because not everyone has them. But I just think that these are great plugins to check out for yourself if you haven't already. If you're into music production, these are really great to check out. So here's the other effect rack. I'm going to turn off the limiter first so you can hear it just as is. All right, it's a little quiet. Let me turn it up. So I really like this chain because it's using a bunch of really great third-party plugins that I think are useful for people that are into this style of music. Decapitator, this is by Sound Toys. This is really like a great analog tape machine box. It's got a really great saturation in it. It adds a lot of noise floor too, like that sound of electronics. It's not necessarily crackle, but it's just the sound of like sort of a noise floor that you get in analog gear. And when you limit the sound, you're bringing up that noise floor. You can really hear it. So this is just a great module. And then I'm doing compression. So I've got an opto compressor here. It's just hitting this. See how hard I'm hitting that compressor? I'm hitting it super hard because I don't want that dynamic range to be there. I want it to sound kind of like you're not going to get a whole lot of punchiness and depth to the sound because it's sampled from somewhere old, right? So you're going to hit a compressor kind of hard. And then this is called an opto compressor. This is going to give you a pretty musical sound even when you're hitting it super hard. And I just use the gain to dial back in the volume after I've hit it really hard. And it just gives you a really nice sound. It's just a really great sounding compressor. You'll see a lot of producers use this for the character kind of sounds. So the vinyl crackle, the flutter, some of the saturation. I add a little bit of space reverb on mine. This is just a great plugin. It'll give that older sound to things. It's kind of like Ableton's vinyl distortion module, except there's just more options. This digital module is also really great because if you turn this on and turn it all the smooth all the way up, you can really basically create that loss of frequency sound as well doing that. So really great module. And then finally I do the EQ. So you can see I'm taking things away, right? It's subtractive EQ primarily. And then this is Fab Filter Limiter, and this is just a limiter, but it's just got a great visual feedback, so you can see how I'm limiting the sound. I don't do anything special with this. I just make sure that when I limit any sound before I put it into my track or I make a sample pack, I make sure that I limit it with really high oversampling. So I've got 32x oversampling. That way there's no inner transient peaks when you're limiting something. And a common mistake I see, especially with Ableton users, is when they export their audio files, they hit the normalize button, which doesn't really guarantee that you're going to get a very clean limit. So it's going to bring the volume level up if you use the normalize feature on the export window for Ableton. It's a really useful feature, but it's not going to guarantee that you're going to have a good sounding limit. So you might get some of that digital distortion or those inner sample peaks that will sound very apparent on like an iPhone speaker. It'll just be distorted because it's actually not truly limiting the sound. It's letting some things get through, and that's distorting speakers on devices and headphones and stuff. So you want to avoid that. Even if it is lo-fi music, you still want the music to sound clean when you're listening to it. So I use this limiter. It's really great. And that's basically how you go through making a lo-fi piano sound. You can use stock plugins. You can use third-party stuff. I just wanted to show you some ones that I really like for getting that sound. And if you like these MIDI clips or you like these effect changes you see in this video, you can get this stuff for free. A link is in the description. I put a lot of stuff on my Gumroad store just for you to check out, see if you get something from it. And if you got something from this video, please feel free to support the channel by hitting the like and subscribe button. I have a new channel. It really helps me with my growth, keeps me making videos. And yeah, hopefully you learned something new today, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.